David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with some pleasure I rise to speak on the Tariff New Zealand-Hong Kong-China Closer Economic Partnership Agreement Amendment Bill. And like some of the other speakers that have gone before me, I'd like to acknowledge those ministers that have contributed to this bill over the number of years, starting with Jim Sutton, with Phil Goff, with Tim Grosser. And also to acknowledge too the work of Julian Ludbrook, as my colleague Marion Street said. He's been in many ways a font of knowledge and an extremely wise asset to MFAT and being able to shepherd this sort of negotiation through quite a complex phase, and not to also forget the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and John Hayes' ability to take on some of these things, to question rigorously the ministry and to ensure that we have a very good agreement. Mr. Speaker, this is, as other speakers have said before me, is an important bill because it really will enable an application of preferential tariff rates under the CEP. Hong Kong already has, as many of us know, very liberal trading laws which offer duty-free imports for many countries, and this CEP will add additional benefits to that. Not only is Hong Kong an important market in its own right, it's about our 9th largest export destination in 2009, but it provides, I think, strategically, and John Hayes, I think, touched on this, a vital foothold for New Zealand businesses in gaining access to an expanding, larger Chinese market. It is, as has been said, for us, we are the only country in the world to hold an agreement of this nature, both with China and with Hong Kong, and it amplifies, I think, the important nature and the important position they occupy in terms of where our economy is facing in the future. Building economic relationships with Asia in general, and also, but of course specifically Hong Kong, is vital to New Zealand's future economic prosperity. These are the major developing, expanding markets, and as New Zealand depends so much on our exports, the CEP is another step in this direction. It's been evaluated both positively and negatively by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. One of the negative impacts it could have is the impact it has on manufacturers of footwear and some textiles. This is something that has come up in other FTAs before it. I think with the degree of phase-out period for the tariffs in this particular case, it will allow those businesses in New Zealand to be able to adjust and hopefully maintain and develop into a higher niche occupation in terms of our manufacturing. In terms of both labour rights and environmental sustainability, again, these are most important to New Zealand and to New Zealanders. They are core values. They should not be sacrificed for the case of increased trade. Once again, I think under the CEP, from what we can see, much of that is contained in the environmental agreement with shared objectives and the labour memorandum of understanding, which states that labour laws should not be used for protectionist measures. They should also not be weakened or reduced to increase trade and investment. That too is locked into this agreement. There are a range of advantages for New Zealand. Many of these have been traversed earlier, but it includes mainly the better access and the service in the areas, the key sectors of business, of communications, environmental services, and we will achieve with this agreement a favoured nation status, enabling New Zealand exporters to benefit from preferential treatment that Hong Kong provides to its future free trade agreement partners. And that will certainly I think, ensure that we have a much better and much more sustainable and stronger relationship as we go into the future. The CEP is, as others again have mentioned, future-proofed to a large degree by the ratchet clause, which says that any future unilateral liberalisation in Hong Kong will apply, such as education, for example, will apply under this agreement as well. And the investment, while not included in the CEP, New Zealand and Hong Kong have agreed in a legally binding exchange of letters to negotiate an investment protocol within 2 years of entry into force of this CEP. So in a sense we are gaining advantages, we're ensuring safeguards, Mr. Speaker, and we're also ensuring that this agreement is robust enough to be able to be taken forward into the future. New Zealand is really has been at the vanguard of many of the free trade agreements throughout the world. We were the first, as many of course know, that with China, and as I said before, we now have a free trade agreement with China and this agreement with Hong Kong under this bill. Our exports to China have increased by 65% just in the short time since 2008, since Phil Goff negotiated that agreement with China. It was historic, and it has meant that now China is now our second largest trading partner and likely become even more important into the future. It's a long way if you look back from 1972 when New Zealand basically shipped most of its practically 2/3, nearly 3/4 of its exports to the UK. And when the UK joined the European Community, the EC, suddenly we were forced to confront the reality that we needed to find other markets. In less than 5 years, the proportion that we were sending to the UK, of exports to the UK, was less than 20%. That, in a sense, is a remarkable achievement when we look back in history. It shows that when New Zealand faces adversity like that, we are able to respond and be flexible. And I think those were the historic antecedents that formed the basis for our outward-looking and our capacity to look at other countries in terms of free trade agreements. We are very good at diversifying our trading partners. We are not so good, I would argue, in terms of diversifying our economy. Our economy has largely stayed reliant on those same products that we once exported to the UK back in 1972. And if there is one weakness and one underlying factor of the way in which our economy has been declining over the last few years, it is the fact that the relative wealth our relative wealth that we are achieving from our exports and from export of commodities in particular is not keeping pace with the imported manufactured goods that we need for our economy. A small anecdote: just a couple of weeks ago, I was visiting the Scion, the Crown Research Institute in Rotorua, which does research into forestry and our forest products. They have developed amazing products: plastics made out of wood, biofuels made out of from wood products, etc., etc. The biggest failing, of course, is that right now our forests are owned effectively by foreigners. 70% or most of our forests are actually owned by foreigners, and much of that technology, while it could really increase our value-added exports, is simply not able to be applied. Instead, what we are doing, as Russell Norman mentioned before, is we are shipping offshore logs to China in an untreated, unfinished, unprocessed way and not achieving what we really could be achieving from our primary products. So while